I'd like to show you a method using Google Forms to encourage students to read before they come to class. There are other online questionnaire systems available, but this video is going to assume that you have access to Google Drive, Google Docs, Google Forms, etc. My plan is to show you how to create, disseminate, and review the responses that you collect from students. First, let's talk about creation. Here's my syllabus for my engineering math class. I'd like to create a readback for lesson 13, which is concerning the Laplace transform, totally irrelevant to this discussion, but I'm going to add a question to the readback about this particular equation, 13.6. So returning to my Google Drive, if I dig down into my class folder, this is stuff that I've created and how I organize my files. You can organize yours however you see fit. I'll drill down into my engineering math folder and into my readback folder. And I want to create the next readback, this next reading response form. You can see the dates of the reading response. I'm creating a readback response for February 21st, so I'm going to go back to the Google Drive. I usually just take the most recent readback form and make a copy of it. And this can often take a few seconds for Google to do. You can see down here creating a copy of readback. It will create the readback form in the same directory. I usually then immediately rename it to February, to the date, so in this case February 21st. And here we see the new readback form. Open up the form by double-clicking on it. And you can see that it's just a copy of the readback from lesson 12. Now to make this work for lesson 13, I have to edit and save the new form. Well, I've already got the form, I need to edit it. This thing up here is the message that students receive when the form is closed. Let's go up there and change it to lesson 13 and the Laplace transform. And then I usually just repeat this down here in the title. And there's usually a little note in here about what I'm actually asking them to read. Pretty redundant, but asking them to read lesson 13 from the textbook. Most of my readbacks have these two questions: what was interesting about today's reading and what was a question that you had, and also a rating for students to indicate how serious or how confused they were about their particular question. And then usually I'll have a third question that's related specifically to the day's reading. Now, this particular reading comes at the end of the introduction of several different transforms. One question or one skill that the students need to develop is how to choose the right transform for the right differential equation. So I'm going to use this equation to kind of be the foundation for this question about how do I know which transform to use. So I'll type the question. So I entered the question. What is it about equation 13.6 that indicates the use of the Laplace transform instead of, say, the Fourier cosine or sine transform? And I'll just leave that there. And it's a detailed question that kind of tests their engagement with the reading. Students are instructed that these reading responses need to be completed at least 90 minutes prior to class time. The easiest way to enforce that is through the use of a script that is attached to this template readback. So what I need to do now is adjust the due date for the responses. So if I go to the Tools menu and the Script Editor, it'll open up a script that's responsible for closing down this form at an appropriate time. And I'd like this thing to end at 11:30 on February 21st. So I just changed the form close date to that. I save the form, and then I run the form. And I'm going to get a permission dialog. So I click Review Permissions. I'll scroll down to the bottom and allow. This is boilerplate. You do this for every form that you create. Up here it's running, and now this script will monitor the time and will shut the form down at this particular point in time. If we go back to the readback form, you'll notice that right now the form is off. That's because I copied this from a previously closed readback form. So make sure that you go up to the responses dialog and toggle the accepting responses switch. And if I go up there again, I see it's now accepting responses. I can toggle that on and off independent of the script that is responsible for turning the form off at a particular moment. This form is now ready. If I click this blue button up here, Send Form, I can get a link that I can send to my students. I often shorten the link and then just copy this into an email, or in my case I put it on the syllabus. I'm only showing you the basics of what I do. There are lots of details and lots of variations on this. And I suppose we could talk about those at another time. The question now is, what happens when the students fill out this form? What do you see as the instructor? If I go back to the readback section, you see that there are these responses. So every form has an associated responses file. If I open that form, I will see the student responses. I'm going to, for the sake of anonymity, take one of these and anonymize it, and then I'll come back and show it to you when I've done that. So I've opened up the responses for February 16th. This is a pretty typical example of what you would see from the students. There are 14 students in my class, and I see that I've received responses from 14 students, so that's good. This is not very readable at the moment. That's because the default is to not wrap the text within a cell. So the first thing I do when I'm reviewing these things is typically highlight the response fields. So there's one field for each question. And I turn on wrapping, which kind of makes things a little messy. So then I will often resize the columns a little bit so that they're wider. And then I can just scan through the responses. I can see what they thought was interesting. I can see what questions they had. I can see how they rated their questions. So this person was really concerned about this particular question. Others are less pressing. Here are a couple more 4s. And then finally there's the detail question. In this particular case, how is the Fourier transform similar to and different from the Laplace transform that you studied in differential equations? And here are some responses to that. I go through once a week and check to see who's responded and assign a very small amount of credit to whether there was a response or not. I don't get into the quality of the responses, although if I see consistently students not putting in serious responses, I will let them know and perhaps dock them some points. I rarely use the responses directly in class. Mostly I read through them before class and use them to inform what I'm doing in the day's class. Students will sometimes send you messages through here that they're concerns that they have or things that they liked. It's a nice channel of communication. It's simple, it's quick. I've been using it for years, and students seem to enjoy it.